Yes.
Welcome all of you. Welcome to this uh, single lecture series, a silver jubilee lecture of single lecture series of Academy of Rog Nidan. We welcome all of you on the behalf of as a coordinator of this event. I am very happy that I am the coordinator of this. I get opportunity to coordinate the silver jubilee lecture of the academy of Rognidan. Now, before starting the event, we go for a Dhanvantari Vandana. I request Dr. Ganesh Kolhe sir to play a Dhanvantari Vandana.
Yes, sir.
श्री धन्वन्तरि स्तोत्रम्। ॐ शङ्खं चक्रं जलौकां दधदमृतघटं चारुदोर्भिश्चतुर्भिः सूक्ष्मस्वच्छातिहृद्यां शुकपरिविलसन्मौलिमम्भोजनेत्रम् कालाम्भोदोज्ज्वलाङ्गम् कटितटविलसच्चारुपीताम्बराढ्यम् वन्दे धन्वन्तरिं तं निखिलगदवनप्रौढदावाग्निलीलम्।
Thank you, Ganesh sir.
Hello. Yes.
Okay. Since the first lecture from respected Dr. P.S. Badgi sir, now this is the 25th lecture, and this is big opportunity for us that we are very happy that most of the previous our guest speaker are also in this lecture, and with the blessing of respected Pawan sir, Atul Vashne sir, who have started this. For this lecture, I invite Dr. Atul Vashne sir to bless us with his starting lecture.
उपस्थित हमारे सभी वरिष्ठ जन और मेरे सभी सहयोगी, आज इस सिंगल लेक्चर सीरीज की 25th लेक्चर दैट इज सिल्वर जुबली को देख के एक बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है कि जो पौधा हम लोगों ने शुरू में इतना उम्मीद नहीं था कि इतना अच्छा रेस्पॉन्स आएगा। एक शुरुआत की जून जुलाई में मीटिंग की और लगातार अच्छे रूप में हमें बहुत अच्छे वक्ता लगातार मिले। वक्ताओं ने अपने अनुभव का सार निचोड़ हम सब लोगों के बीच में शेयर किया बिना किसी झिझक के। और एक हम इस कोरोना काल में एक नई चीज को शुरुआत भी कर पाए और आगे अन्य लोगों के लिए एक रास्ता भी दिखा पाए। इस बात के लिए मैं अपने सभी सहयोगियों का बहुत दिल से बधाई देता हूं और उनको सभी को इस बात के लिए मैं बहुत मन से सबका शुक्रगुजार भी हूं कि सबने पूरे अपने सहयोग इस लेक्चर सीरीज को चलाने में किया। आज के टाइम में सब व्यस्त भी हैं और उसके बावजूद भी लगातार इस लेक्चर सीरीज के लिए समय निकाल के जुड़ना, अपने व्यूज देना सबके लिए कठिन भी था। हमारे ब्यागी सर तो शुरू से आखिर तक लगभग, ब्यागी सर, अनुराग सर, काफी कुछ ऐसे लोग हैं जो शुरू से आखिर तक हर सीरीज में लगभग रहे भी हैं। और जो हम शुरुआत में इसके यूट्यूब चैनल से, फेसबुक लाइव से लगातार हमारे दर्शक बढ़ते भी जा रहे हैं, श्रोता। और जो हम एक लक्ष्य लेके चले थे कि किसी भी विषय पर जो चीज गूढ़ है, अभी बहुत ज्यादा शास्त्रों में वर्णन नहीं है, और उनका आज के हिसाब से हम लोगों ने अपने अनुभव में क्या नई चीज ऐड की है, जो सभी लोग चाहते भी हैं कि एक परमार्जित रूप भी सामने आना चाहिए। और ये मुझे बड़ी खुशी है कि जैसे आवरण जैसे विषय पे और सभी विषय उस तरीके, डॉक्टर हेमंत कलिता जी हैं, इन्होंने हिस्टोपैथोलॉजी का बिल्कुल लेटेस्ट सारी चीजें दी। तो बिना किसी बैरियर के, बिना किसी बाउंड्री के सभी लोगों ने लेटेस्ट चीज अपने अनुभव को शेयर भी किया। और बहुत बड़ी चीज ये है कि ये हमारे यूट्यूब चैनल पर, हमारे फेसबुक पेज पर एक हमेशा के लिए स्थायी रूप में भी है। और हम प्रयास ये कर रहे हैं कि इसका डॉक्यूमेंटेशन भी लिखित में भी हम करें। जो चीज समराइज वे में जो हम नए लोगों ने हमें शेयर की है उसको हम लिखित रूप में भी लाएं। हमारे ब्यागी सर हैं, इसके लिए भी लगातार प्रयास कर रहे हैं। तो मैं इस अवसर पर अपने सभी श्रोताओं को ये अनुरोध करूंगा कि वो इसी तरीके से हम सब लोगों का उत्साहवर्धन भी करते रहें। और ये सीरीज, मेरी तो इच्छा यह है कि ये इसी तरीके से सिल्वर जुबली, गोल्डन जुबली, प्लेटिनम जुबली सब चलती रहे, लगातार हर सप्ताह चलते रहे। और धीरे धीरे जब हमारे निदान के एक्सपर्ट्स के लेक्चर्स खत्म होंगे तो हम अन्य विषयों के लोगों को भी उनके विचार जानने के लिए इसमें आमंत्रित कर सकते हैं। अभी तो फिलहाल हमारे पास खुद इतने अच्छे अच्छे वक्ता हैं, अभी सभी वक्ताओं को सुनने का हमें मौका भी नहीं मिल पाया है। तो सभी से इस अनुरोध के साथ कि अपनी ऊर्जा को इसी तरीके से बनाए रहें, हम सब लोगों को इसी तरीके से सहयोग देते रहें और ये हमारी श्रृंखला आगे बढ़ती रहे। इस लेक्चर के लिए मैं डॉक्टर प्रशांत जी के लिए शुभकामनाएं देखो बहुत, वो अपने अच्छे तरीके से लगातार चला रहे हैं, इस कार्य को आगे बढ़ाएं। धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद अतुल सर। आज के सेशन के चेयरपर्सन डॉक्टर अनूप वैश्य सर, जो कि अपने बहुत व्यस्तता, उनकी अभी कोविड ड्यूटी लगती है, ओपीडी से रहती है, ऐसे समय में भी उन्होंने सिर्फ एक रिक्वेस्ट पे उन्होंने तुरंत मेरी रिक्वेस्ट एक्सेप्ट की कि आज के इसके लिए वो चेयरपर्सन बने हैं। वो हमारे पुराने वक्ता भी रह चुके हैं। मैं उनकी परमिशन से आज की सिंगल लेक्चर सीरीज के लिए मुकेश सर को आमंत्रित करने की आज्ञा चाहता हूँ और उनका थोड़ा सा इंट्रोडक्शन देने की आज्ञा चाहता हूँ। अनुपय सर।
हाँ, स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं। You can start.
Okay. For today's single lecture series, we have a very renowned practitioner and academician from the Kerala, Dr. Mukesh Edavalatha. He is currently working as an assistant professor in the Department of Rog Nidan at Vaidyaratnam PS Warrior Ayurved College, Kottakkal. He completed his BMS from SDM College, Udupi, and MD from the Ayurveda Government Ayurveda College, Kannur, Kerala. He served as a medical officer in Kerala also, and then after he started as a assistant professor in the Department of Rog Nidam. Before taking up his current tenure education, he was a medical officer for 5 years. He is an active clinician and clinical educator. He also has, to his credit, has several published papers in the national and the international journals. Also, he had delivered a talk in various seminars in India and abroad also. In 2013, he had visited the southern state of the USA as a part of group study exchange program and deliver a orientation talk on Ayurveda at different conferences. He is a regular faculty in the Ayurvedic training programs, research workshop, and also editorial member in leading scientific journals. Currently, he is working as a guide also, a PG scholars and PhD also, PhD earning his PhD also. He is also a director of Kottakkal Ayurveda School of Excellence, which offers certificate program aimed at providing continued innovative and functional learning for Ayurvedic practitioners. He is a very successful practitioner in Kerala, and where I have heard him in 2 or 3 previous lectures, he has deep knowledge of Sanhitas and also a modern aspect of that Sanhita and also a modern pathy. So I am very happy to hear him. Now, with the permission of respected Anubhashya sir, I request Dr. Mukesh sir to deliver his lecture. Thank you.
Is the slide visible?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
And I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir.
अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गुरवे सर्वलोकानां भिषजे भवरोगिणां निधये सर्वविद्यानां दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। Respected chair of this session and all my senior gurus, teachers, and all my colleagues in the Roganidhana family. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to deliver a class in this August gathering. Actually, I would like to congratulate the organizers for this being the 25th lecture series. And a special congrats to Dr. Adul Vashni sir, Vyadgi sir, and Pavan Kumar sir, and whoever has taken the initiation of this Academy of Roganidhana. Usually, I was able to hear first 2 or 3 lectures. After that, because of my OP timings and clinical practice, I was not able to follow the classes online live. But I usually don't miss the classes because it's available in YouTube, and I used to hear the lectures, and it was very informative so that we can keep ourselves updated. So again, I feel humbled and honored to be a part of this gathering. With that, I would like to go into my topic, Vyadhi Janaga Nidana, implications in diagnosis and management. I have around 100 slides, and for some slides, I may speak for a prolonged time, and for some, I may skip as well because most of them will be familiar for you. The topic that I have selected is somewhat, what you can say it is a regressive one because we Ayurvedic people, we are thinking about how we can modernize our science and how we can incorporate all the modern principles into our practice. So, of course, that is a need of the hour as well. But somewhere along the line, on the race to modernize our science, there is a small doubt in our mind that have we forgot something that is very core to our science, or are we diluting our science in at least in some regards? So. With that prologue, I would like to go into my topic. After my BAMS and after my PG studies, I felt as if like this, as you see in the picture, because after going through the Nidana PG curriculum, we studied all those pathologies, histopathologies, microbiology, and all those stuff. We felt very much confident because we learned a lot of modern things so that we can incorporate that into our practice. And when after entering into the clinical practice as a medical officer in a government setup hospital in Kerala, suddenly I found out that there is something missing in my approach. So the same diagnosis, modern diagnosis, when we treat with similar kind of medicines, the patients are not responding properly. So why is this happening? Why I am failing to hit the target? So this thought kept on creeping into my mind, so that I was forced to go back to my teachers, especially who taught me in the UG level, especially Dr. Srinivasa Sajira sir, Niranjan sir, and all in SDM Udupi. When we started interacting again, I found out that there is some important things that we are missing when we apply all these principles into our practice. So whatever I am going to say from now on, some of you might be very familiar with that, so you might be find it very boring, and some of you may have some disputes regarding what I say. So I also accept, I humbly accept that I may be telling many things wrong. So you please correct. I just wanted to bring our attention as a whole, as a group, this Roganana group, into something which we have to focus again. So whichever I am telling wrong, you please correct me in the final discussion session. And please feel free to interrupt me. So whenever the session goes boring, you please, the chair, especially the chair, can ask me to stop the presentation, and we can move on to the further discussions. So I just as a introduction, I'll just put two cases of duodenal ulcer that came to me. So typically the presentation was based on the predominant presentation in the patient. The presentation was Pitta Vadaja Shula. The patient was diagnosed with an endoscopy of having duodenal ulcer. And when we assess the Nidana, the patient had something pertaining to Kadu, Drava, and Shida Pradhana Ahara Viharas. And the medicine was selected as Guduchi Adikwada. Similarly, another patient came with duodenal ulcer, again Pitta Vada Shula presentation, but the Nidana was slightly different, like Kadu, Lagu, and Ruksha. So after Agni Divana and all, the medicine finally, the selected medicines came to be Vidari Adikrita. So here we can see that even though the modern diagnosis is same and the endoscopical finding is same, the treatment measures adopted varied because of the difference in the exposure. That means the etiological exposure that the both patient had. So that is a point that I am going to speak throughout this presentation, that whether we have to give some importance to the patient-specific nidanas rather than ascribing the textual nidana onto the given patient. So this is another example. So we have two cases of stroke or Pakshagada. The presentation being Pakshagada. I am not saying that all strokes can be called as Pakshagada because there are exceptions. For example, a cerebellar stroke, we may not call it as a Pakshagada, rather we may call it as a Brahma Roga based on the presentation. So as far as I believe, Ayurvedic diagnosis relies not on the modern diagnosis, but it relies on the symptom presentation or symptom complex that is available in the given patient. So here both patients had Pakshagada, and in the CT or MRI came to be the same defect, that is infarct in the internal capsule area, which is very common. We all know that. And the patient one had was obese and he has dyslipidemia. And when we assessed the Nidana, then it was full Sandarpana throughout his life. So we suspected an Avarana, and the treatment line will be formulated on the basis of Staulyahara, Avaranahara, and the drug of choice may be, the important one might be Shilajadu. Whatever drugs I am saying here is that what I am using in my practice. It's not a final word. Everybody can have their own drug choices because Ayurveda is such a beautiful science where for hitting the same target, we can use multiple measures. In the second patient, again, the same internal capsule infarct, but the patient was a coolie and he's lean and he's hardworking and Adi Vyayama, and he also had bhaya, anxieties, then krodha, then irregular food intakes and all those things. And from this Nidana, the evidence from this Nidana, we can assume that this patient had some sort of Vada Pragopa other than the Avarana, and the main line of treatment will be Brahmana, Saumanasya Janana, and the drug of choice might be Kalyana Virda to address all these things. So my point is that based on the presentation, rather than based on the presentation itself, we also have to think about some other factors, especially the etiological factors, the importance why that I'm going to tell on the later part of this presentation. So these are the contents of my presentation. I will digress a bit in the initial part from the main topic because why such a thought process is relevant in the current era. That's why I'm going to digress a bit from the current topic of Vyadhi Janaka Nidana initially. So the current clinical approach, the drawbacks and solutions, and the current relevance of Ayurvedic approach. So these are the first things that I'm going to speak about. And the next thing is the definition of the Nidana assessment. What is the clinical utility of assessing the patient-specific Nidana, and different classifications of Nidanas, how we can interpret this in current clinical practice, and how we can adopt these things in our teaching module so that we can enable our students to understand all these concepts in a better way. And the final thing that I'm going to speak is about how practically we can go about this assessment of Nidana in the given patient. So the first thing that I'm going to speak is about the current clinical approach. What are the drawbacks and solutions? So there are so many drawbacks as far as Ayurveda Nidana is concerned. For example, there is a lack of consensus among experts regarding the modern correlations and interpretations. For example, you take psoriasis in Kerala, it is Sidma Kushta, and if you go to North India, it is Ega Kushta. You take rheumatoid arthritis in North India, it is Amavada, and in Kerala, it is Vadarakta. So there are a lot of what you call absence of consensus among practitioners in themselves. So suppose a North Indian teacher comes to the South India for a Viva, then the students may be in a big problem. Why? Because there is a what you call lack of unanimity among teaching faculties itself. Then the next important thing is the lack of inter-observer agreements regarding the diagnosis. For example, a duodenal ulcer, for some it is Shula, and some other one it is Gulma, and some other one it may be Amlapita. And again, this can vary depending upon the presentation, that I agree. But still, there are people who have difference of opinion. And again, regarding the assessment techniques also, there are a lot of inter-observer disagreements. So this we have to sort out. And the third thing is we don't have enough evidence for supporting this integrated approach. For example, if we compare some of the histopathology with that of our dosha concept, we need sufficient evidences to support such a what you call theoretical postulate. So such things, these are the important drawbacks. Let us see common prescription for a low back pain by an average BAMS student. So the diagnosis will be like a Kadigraha and IVDP, and the prescription will be something in the line of Rasna Sapta Kwada or Maharasnadi Kashaya, Yogaraj Ugulu, a pattern medicine that is available in the clinic, and some sort of oil for application. So irrespective of what is the patient's prakriti or what is the patient's Agni status, the students tend to learn like a typical modern diagnosis is equal to a given Ayurvedic medicine. Then there are other correlations based on the nosology, modern nosology and Ayurvedic nosology. For example, gout is Vadarakta, rheumatoid arthritis is Vadarakta, or bronchitis is Kasa, or rheumatic fever is Amavada. So like that, there are a lot of what you call one-to-one correlations that is going on in our field. So what are the commonly followed prescription models? So typically an Ayurvedic diagnosis is equal to Ayurvedic medicine. For example, Kashtartava is equal to Saptasara Kashaya or Sugumara Gurda, like that. Or a modern diagnosis is equal to a particular Ayurvedic medicine. For example, gout is equal to Manjishtadi Kashaya. So like that, there is a typical pattern that is being followed by the current what you call practitioners. I'm not saying that, I'm not generalizing that everyone is doing that, but a big majority of people, they are doing that, and they are teaching as well in the same way. And then there are new attempts. I think we had a lot of classes on histopathology in this forum itself. And I was very lucky to hear all those things. And I have to appreciate them in that effort, because it is a very novel idea, and we have to pursue such ideas to be relevant in the current era. But there are some drawbacks as well that I would like to highlight. See, there are opinions that hyperplasia is something that is similar to Vada. The Vada is the culprit there. Hypertrophy, there is Kapha, and inflammation is Pitta. So there are a lot of one-to-one correlations going on with the modern pathology and that of our dosha concept. So there are benefits for such a correlation, and there are what you call drawbacks as well for such a correlation. Let us take an example of a patient with a bronchiectasis. So if you go for an MRI scan of the chest of a given patient, let us take a bronchiectasis. So a patient with a bronchiectasis came to us. So in the first visit, the patient had a cough with a profuse yellow sputum and fever. And in the second visit, the same patient had cough, chest pain, thin, clear sputum. And in the third visit, the patient had a cough, dry sputum, and such features. So what is the pattern that is evident here? We can see that the same patient had a different dosha predominance at different visits. So this is the core of Ayurveda. This is the heart of Ayurveda. Suppose we say that bronchiectasis is equal to Elakanadi Kashaya or Amrita Prasakrita or whatever medicines that you are using in your practice. That's not the way the Ayurveda is to be practiced, because Acharyas have always highlighted the importance of Avastha Vishesha. Wherever he says Chikilsa, he says an important thing, Avastha Vishesha. And as Roganidana lecturers or teachers, we have to enable our students to identify this rather than going for a one-to-one correlation with that of modern medicine. I'm not saying that that is wrong. This one-to-one correlation is wrong, because in many scenarios we have this approach has its own benefits. But coming to the treatment, we always have to teach them how to identify a patient-specific therapeutic indicators. So this is the important one that I usually say. Whenever we have a theoretical postulate, there should be some use for that in our practice. For example, if we say that inflammation is pitta, and I don't personally agree to this, because I can give you several examples. You take arthritis, there is inflammation, but some of the times the patient presents with vada predominant lakshanas, and giving vadahara medicines will relieve that inflammation, as evident from the ESR that is available on the follow-up visits. So it's not only pitta. The inflammation can be of different dosha predominance, as evident from the lakshanas available in the patient. So that is another point. It's a topic of discussion for maybe we can keep a seminar on that. But what I'm saying is that whenever we are telling that inflammation is pitta, then what we have to do, that theory should be substantiated by something that we can use in practice, isn't it? Pariksha gair bahuvidam pariksha, it is told. So such a theory should be put to test. It has to be put for examinations and validations. Then only we can say, we can correlate that. So suppose you are saying that such and such histopathology is vada dosha, such a histopathological presentation is pitta dosha, then why, there is a big question. Why we need to correlate like that? If we need to correlate like that, then there should be some substantiation on the treatment side. Otherwise, this is a futile exercise. It is merely what you call something where we can express ourselves to the modern field. So you say that inflammation is pitta, and you apply that in practice. So you give pittahara medicines in every inflammation that is available, and ultimately in practice you get that result. Okay, then that theory is validated. Otherwise, that theory is only a mere theoretical exercise rather than practice. So that is why somewhere around we have to think, we have to go back, we have to regress back into our own basic principles. Why we are not using our own basic principles so much is because we have not enriched ourselves to apply those principles that are told in the Samhitas into the current era. Unless we go and do that, then we go behind all these modern things, then I think it will be better for our clinical practice. So a mixopathy, whether it is beneficial for the patient or science, I don't think that it is beneficial for patients or science. Whether rigid correlations are necessary, I don't think personally. So these are my personal opinions. Everybody will have their own opinions, and I humbly request that you please don't take that this is final. I am also a humble student. I have been in practice for the last 10 to 15 years, and this is what I have felt from my practice. Oh, so what we need is a parallel understanding of modern and Ayurveda. I usually say to my students that you have to open two shelves in your brain. One is for modern and one is for Ayurveda. And both of them are important, but you make sure that one does not jump into the other shelf. There should not be any, what you call a channel in between. There can be a channel. How we can do that is because suppose we say that this type of hyperplasia is Vada, then you have to substantiate that. You do clinical trials and you say that Vadahara medicines are always effective in this hyperplasia. Okay, then that theory is substantiated, then we can put into practice. But unless they are not validated clinically, then it cannot be taught and it cannot be taken into practice. And another thing that we have to keep in mind is that modern prognosis is not at all applicable in many of the cases when we apply Ayurvedic treatment protocols. So what are the solutions? I highlighted some of the drawbacks. Now I am coming to the solutions. So what we need is a distinctive understanding of modern as well as Ayurvedic fundamental principles. So there should be a distinctive, what you call, or a boundary between these things. And the next important thing that we have to do among ourselves is standardizing the Ayurvedic approach. So we have to develop and validate novel techniques for Ayurvedic assessment. And there should be a consensus among all our teachers, all across India. There should be a consensus regarding what is the correlation, how can we interpret such and such pathology according to Ayurveda. So there should be a consensus development. And the third one is we have to develop uniform teaching protocols. For example, 3 to 4 years back in Kerala, we have a core, the Nidana Association. So what we did is we summoned all the Nidana teachers from all over Kerala, and we developed a uniform teaching protocol so that each disease will be taught uniformly, their modern correlations, their assessment techniques. We made a consensus, and we put out a uniform teaching protocol so that we are following that in now in all over Kerala. So such things can be thought about by the Nidana Association to be conducted pan India as well. Next thing that we need is comprehensive research for especially diagnostic tool development. I request all the Nidana faculties at least to develop diagnostic tools based on Ayurveda for every diseases that we come across, so that we have uniform approach all over India in diagnosis. Then second thing is that we have to identify biomarkers or molecular data. If at all we want to integrate modern into our science, then we have to identify these biomarkers and molecular data that is confirming with the specific dosha patterns. Otherwise, it will be only a theoretical exercise. And whenever we do some correlation studies for histopathology, again, that has to be conducted through trials with with reference to the dosha concepts. And there should be clinical trials for systems integration. So these things we have to carry on when we go forward. But we cannot dispense with the modern knowledge. We cannot say that modern knowledge is not needed for our students. That is very important. In fact, I can quote a lot of clinical examples where modern knowledge have saved my face in my practice. So we have to equip our students to be clinically competent. So the contemporary advances in epidemiology and diagnosis should be taught to our students. Modern investigations obviously should be taught to our students. So new age patients are well learned. So we need modern knowledge. And also it helps in decision making, so that we can decide whether we have to keep the patient or to refer the patient. And whenever we have to interact, we have to transact with the modern scientists or the modern scientific world, especially with regards to research and policy making. We need modern knowledge. So I'm not against modern, but only thing is that we should not go behind modern knowledge, diluting our Ayurvedic principles. So that is why I usually say one-to-one correlations is always an unrewarding exercise in practice, and Ayurvedic diagnosis should be always based on lakshanas in the given patient. Why I am telling is because of this textual input. Sarvesham cha vyadinam vadapitta sleshmana eva moolam. We all know this. I am not going to narrate this sloga again. Tallingatvat drishtaphalatvat agamacha and tallingatvat vadadi lingatvat. Lingam tu vadadinam rauksha alpa sneha deha etc. etc. is told. So the only way the Ayurveda sees the patient is based on the lakshanas. Only way in which the Ayurvedic therapeutic parameters are designed are based on their action on doshas. So whenever we say that such and such histopathology, such and such dosha, then we have to reformulate our pharmacology based on their action on histopathology as well. Then only such an exercise will be beneficial in our practice. So we can always go with the spectrum concept, so that since I told that lakshanas are the core in Ayurvedic diagnosis, we can always think the diseases explained in our Samhitas as disease spectrums rather than independent modern diagnosis. For example, a patient who presented with the CASA can have different modern diagnoses. So like bronchitis, bronchiectasis, interstitial lung disease, the list is very big. I have only quoted 2 or 3 here. So we can diagnose the modern diagnosis for say prognosis, whether we can keep the patient, what are the other investigations that we have to go about the patient. But while coming to the diagnosis, Ayurvedic diagnosis, we think that the patient's predominant presentation is CASA. So let us consider this patient under CASA spectrum, then go towards the Nidana assessment, then the predominant dosha assessment, then we'll go for the other assessments like Prakriti, etc. Then we finally end up in formulating a personalized treatment protocol. So there are other examples. For example, diseases that are presenting with the bleeding as a predominant manifestation can be considered Rakta-Pitta spectrum. Pain as a predominant manifestation as Shula. Pain with a mass as Gulma. Like that. These are only assumptions. Again, these are what you call subjected. This can be subjected for a big debate, and we can discuss on these things. And next, what I'm going to speak about is the relevance of the Ayurvedic approach in the current era. Why we need to refocus on our Ayurvedic approach. So let us see the Tridosha concept. This example, I have told this in my several of my classes. So for some of them who have heard this may be boring for them, but this I use usually in my class. Let us take the example of a pumpkin. Because why? Because most of us, we usually what we do is we tend to correlate Vata Jakasa is viral bronchitis, Pitta Jakasa is bacterial bronchitis. I have seen teachers who are teaching like that. I'm not telling that everyone is like that, but there are at least a few people who teach like that. So this is an introspection. This is not a blame game that I'm doing. This is an introspection. We have to introspect always what we are doing currently in our practice and teaching methodologies. So such a correlation is not at all beneficial. Why? Because let us take the example of this pumpkin. In its unripe stage, it is green, it is heavy. If you poke it, some clear fluid will come out of that. Once it is ripened, it will be yellowish or orangish in color. It will be sweet in taste, somewhat sour and sweet in taste, and it is usually edible at that stage. Suppose if you don't pluck that, you keep it in the field itself, then it will be dried as the image that you can see there. So here we can see that the earlier one can be correlated. I'm not saying that it is exactly kapha, but we can use this principle. So this is a kapha stage. The middle one is the pitta stage, and the last one is the kapha stage. Sorry, vada stage. Suppose if someone says that you have to keep the pumpkin as such without ripening, what we will do? So the ripened pumpkin, if you have to keep it without decaying, we put in refrigerator. So Shida is a treatment for pitta. Suppose someone says that you have to ripen it early, so that you have to transform that kapha stage. Then what we say, you apply heat. Usually we see that we smoke bananas to make them ripen early. So Ushna is the chikitsa for kapha. Suppose someone gives you a dry pumpkin and asks you to eat that, then how can you eat that? Then you may dip in some snigdha grida, or you may put it in water. So snigdha is a treatment for vada. So the same pumpkin has gone through different stages at different instances, and the measures differ. In the same way, the same modern disease can go through different dosha stages at different time intervals. That is why Acharya has always told about the importance of identifying the avastha vishesh of a disease rather than a one-to-one correlation with that of modern medicine. So let us see how different sciences see the same phenomenon. In modern view, the pumpkin fruit gradually accumulates considerable amount of dry fat, soluble total solids, total sugars, total carotenoids. So this is how the ripening process is seen as per modern view. But the same even as per Ayurveda, if we start explaining in terms of our dosha concept, then we can say that there is an influence of kapha in the initial stage, there is an influence of pitta, and then there is an influence of vada in the later stage. So the same phenomenon, but with a different what you call method of explanation, we can see the same thing. But when we come to Ayurvedic view, we may view it in a physical based on their physical attributes like firmness, acceptability, softness, sweetness, color, etc., etc. But so what I'm saying is that the same disease are looked upon by different angle by the modern medicine as well as the Ayurveda. So we have to keep it in the same way. There is no need of mixing that, but both approaches are important as well. Let us see what is a new trend in the current modern biomedicine. So apart from a generic one disease, one medicine sort of approach, they are going towards an individualized response to patient's symptoms, combining precision diagnosis and personalized treatment. So they have started evolving into something that that has been already told in our Samhitas, and now we are starting to run behind them. See the past, present, and future. The past, it was intuitive medicine based on signs and symptoms. Present, it's an evidence-based medicine, and the clinical trials are the what you call the base of that. And in the future, what they are planning is precision medicine based on specific algorithms. So these algorithms have some play for this artificial intelligence and what you call medical records, machine learning, etc., etc. That will come into play. So what they are trying to do is, depending upon the calculation of the various algorithms, they are going to personalize the treatment and make the treatment more precise to the given patient. So that is why a precision medicine, the concept of precision medicine came into being. So there are some terminologies that is used in the precision medicine. For example, treatment target at patient endotype. I think some of you might have heard about the term phenotype and endotype. Especially it's usually used in diseases like bronchial asthma, allergies, etc. So let us see what phenotype and endotype is all about. So a phenotype is, we know, I'll give an example. Some 4 to 5 years back, a epidemic of chikungunya outbreak was reported in Kerala. So extensively all over the state, there were thousands of cases of chikungunya. So we saw a pattern. The same virus is causing different types of symptomatology in different patients based on their prakriti, ahara, vihara, their place of residence, etc. The same virus is causing different types of presentations. So these can be considered as different phenotypes of the same disease. So a phenotype can be any observable characteristic or trait of a disease, such as the morphology, biochemical, or physiological properties, or irrespective of that, even a disease behavior can be considered as a disease phenotype. Then these phenotypes can have different endotypes within itself. So endotype is a subtype of a condition which is identified by distinctive pathobiological mechanism or distinctive functional derangements. So that is an endotype. See where this modern medicine is going. Already Ayurveda has told that avastha vishesha and importance of personalization and precision, etc. And now modern medicine is going behind that. So all this pharmacogenomics and what you call bioinformatics, all these things now they are trying to go behind this precision medicine. But what we are doing now, we are trying to compare all their pathologies with our own. Why we have to go behind that? That's the question that I want to put forward. So you can see the difference between the different approaches. For example, you take the traditional approach of the modern medicine where the approach is one size fits all. So that there is fever, you give paracetamol for everyone. But the precision medicine, usually they classify the patients by risk. The treatment is more tailored and they focus on the responders for existing treatments. And also they plan for preclinical diseases, just like the Purva Rupa that we have. Or they plan for early interventions and targeted preventions. So this is where they are directed at. So this precision medicine, we already know that what it is. I'm not going to read this loga for everyone because we all have studied this in Charaga Vibhanasthana 8th chapter. So Tasmad Aduram Parikshet, and all these things are algorithms. All these things are algorithms with which we can personalize the treatment protocols. We can make our treatments more target specific. And one of them in Vigara assessment is Hedu, that is Nidana. That is what I'm going to concentrate on the rest part of my presentation. I will take around 45 minutes for the next part of my presentation. I hope this is not boring for all of you. If at all, if there is some boring and if you need me to stop, please tell me. So he says in Vigara assessment, Vigaram, Hedu, Dosha, Dushya, Prakriti. There, this Prakriti is not Adura Prakriti. This Prakriti is the Vigara Prakriti. Desha, Kala, etc., etc. He says, coming to the disease nosology, if you take the concepts of modern nosology, then these are based on mainly two things. One is the manifestational criteria of a disease, and the other one is a causal criteria of the disease. So manifestational criteria of a disease, that includes a set of criteria based on signs, symptoms, and laboratory findings that define a particular disease. Whereas a causal criteria describe the disease based on its etiology. So in Ayurveda, we have both of these things in terms of the manifestational criteria. There, Acharyas have used the dosha-based classification. So that we have Vadaja Gulma, Pittaja Gulma, Kafaja Gulma, like that. And for causal criteria or based on the etiology, we have the Nidana-based classification. For example, Sandarpanajanya, Avadarpanajanya, Nija, Agandu, Sharirika, Manasika, like that. So Ayurveda has formulated a more elaborate scheme of classification, which is more appropriate for the precision and personalized medicine centuries before what now modern medicine they are doing. So this is where I'm going into my main talk, that is the Nidana. So the definition, I think all of us know the Nidana definitions, various Nidana definitions. Nidanam karanam ihochyade. And again, it is classified into Tatra Vyadi Tachaiha Vyadi Janagam Vyadi Bodhagam cha Samanyena Uchyade. Tatra Vyadi Janagam Nidanam Heduhu. So that is the initiator. And Vyadi Bodagam Chakaranam Nidana Purarupa Rupa Upashe Samprapti Rupa. So the Hedu Rupa Nidana is very important because it has a dual role where it has the function of Vyadi Janana and it also has the function of Vyadi Bodhana, or it will give you a very valuable information about what type of Vyadi that you are dealing with. So that is why understanding Vyadi Janaga Nidana is very, very important in our practice. Again, there are, if you go through Susruta, Hedu Lakshana Nirdesha Nidanani, Hedava idi Karaga Hedavo, etc., etc. is told. And in Gayadasa, he says, Tatra Hinvandi, Utpatto, Udgandi, Gachandi, Hedavaha, Karaga Hedavaha. So especially he has given a particular definition for that. I am not going to detail because we all are well aware of all these definitions. Again, in Madhugosha, if you go through Madhugosha, there are various references like Nirdishyade Vyadiranena Idi Nidanam, Nishchitya Diyade Pradibhadyade Vyadiranena Idi Nidanam, Nidiyade Nibadyade, etc., etc. And one of the important definition is Sedi Kartavyadago Rogotpada Hedur Nidanam. Sa Idi Kartavyadago Rogotpada Hedur. So that Nidana which ensues, which enables or which initiates a particular pathogenic process leading into a particular disease can be considered as a Hedu or Nidana. So why we need to assess Nidana? That is the next question. So usually what we have seen in practice and even in our colleges when we go for examinations, if you go through a student's case sheet, what will be found? The diagnosis is Gridrasi. And what is the Samprapti written by the student? The patient underwent Vada Pragopa Ahara Vihara, and Vada Pragopa happened and it took Sthana Samsraya in the Kadi Pradesha and it affected the Siddha Snayu Kandara there and it led to the Gridrasi. So here what the student is doing is what we are teaching them. We are teaching them in such a way. This is not correct because we always have to equip them to identify the Nidana in the given patient. So whatever is told in the text are only indicative. They are indicative in a way that they are clues, clinical clues, which you should apply with your own common sense and your own what you call cognitive thinking process. And you have to, based on that beforehand knowledge, you have to identify the particular Nidana in the given patient. So this is not usually what we see in practice now. Maybe in some of the colleges and some of the practitioners, they are following that. But generally speaking, most of them, they do like this. So what happens in treatment? They are trying to break the Samprapti that is told in the textbook in the patient. So that is not going to happen because in patient, the Samprapti was something different. So we have to identify in the patient itself. So that is why identifying the Nidana has several implications. The first implication is it has diagnostic implications with reference to assessing the dosha and dusha, Samprapti Nirnaya, Vyadhi Nirnaya. Then in determining the prognosis of the disease, therapeutic implications in terms of Nidana Parivarjana, planning the doshahara or Vyadhihara treatments, and drafting Patyas. These are only some lists. I think if you go through this, we can populate this list and make into a very big one. Let us see each of that. Diagnostic indicator. So from now on, I am going to give so many examples in my practice. If it is boring for you, please tell me. I will skip all these things. Whatever I have seen in my practice that I am going to say here, there may be wrong in all these examples. There may be something that you want to add to my observations because these are based only on my humble observations. So some of the experts, especially seniors, can add to my observations or even correct me as well. For example, in case of dosha assessment, especially Nidana is important in identifying the taratama of the dosha or arambhaga dosha. Let us take Vada Vyadhi, just like the example of Pakshagada that I told in the initial part of this presentation. So there is a patient with the Vada Vyadhi. So the next question is why the Vada Vyadhi happened in this patient. So we are confused whether it is Avarana, Daduksha, etc. So there are some experts who diagnose thrombosis as Avarana and hemorrhage as Daduksha. I'm totally against that because that doesn't have any therapeutic value for that. But if you go through the patient assessment, in the given patient, the patient underwent all the Apadarpana Ahara Viharas throughout his lifetime. And now we are saying that there is Avarana, then it cannot be substantiated with the treatment arm. So if the patient has underwent what you call all Kapha Pragopa Ahara Viharas, then we can say the Kapha dosha is predominant here. So Kapha has initiated the disease. And even though we may have to address the Vada Vyadhi in the management, we cannot ignore the Kapha, which was the Arambhaga dosha in this patient. So like that, in assessing the dosha also, identifying the nidana in the patient is very important. I'll give an example of an arrhythmia in a patient. So a patient came with arrhythmia, and the patient was taking digoxin, modern medicine. And when we went through the elaborate Nidana assessment, the patient told that right from the childhood, the patient was predominantly using mamsahara, that too beef, excessive beef. So what we understood is that from the Nidana, we assessed, inferred the dusha as mamsa, rasa and mamsa. Then we gave treatment, and then the patient started having very good result. So from Nidana also, we can assess dosha and dusha. Next is Samprapti Nirnaya. For example, a patient came to us with a GIT manifestation, and the patient says that irregular timing of food intake for a prolonged time, then that will give you a clue of the grahani samprapti that has happened, because this abhojanat, ajirnadi bhojanat, vishamasanath, etc. is typically a srodo specific nidana for the annavaha srodas. So in some instances, knowing the nidana will give you an idea about what samprapti might have happened in the given patient. These are only some few examples that came to my mind. You can add on to this with several of your own clinical instances. Next is in the diagnosis. For example, in some cases, by inferring the nidana itself directly, we can go into the diagnosis. For example, a patient came with the diarrhea and the patient says an improper food intake, then definitely we can say that this is food poisoning, this is visujiga because of the improper ahara vihara. Sometimes this nidana is needed for estimating the roga bala. For example, with identifying the degree of exposure to the nidana, because in Ajara says, the more balavan the nidana, the more balavan the disease will be. So to identify the degree, the estimate of the estimation of the roga bala, we may have to look into the nidana. Let us see an example of two patients with hypothyroidism. So this patient of hypothyroidism came with a pitta vada predominant presentation. So usually people will start thinking hypothyroidism, okay, Kanjanara, Gugulu, Varanadi, Kashaya, etc. But hypothyroidism is something there where it has multiple involvement of dadus at multiple time intervals. And we may have to strictly go with dosha specific measures rather than a one-to-one correlation. So here this patient, actually this patient is a nurse in our hospital. So this patient came with a pitta vada predominant presentation. And when we assess the nidana, totally the patient had kadurasa pradana, ruksha ahara viharas. So ruksha in terms of fried items, etc., etc. So we assumed that it is a vada pitta predominant or pitta vada predominant pathology, and drakshadi, which is a typical pitta vada hara medicine, was given initially, followed by tikta grida. Can you think about giving tikta grida in a patient with hypothyroidism? Wonderfully, the patient had a response, and the patient's TSH came to normal without any modern medicine. So this is the importance of identifying the nidana, so that here we could identify the dosha with the help of nidana. There is another case of hypothyroidism. Again, this patient had a predominant intake of dadi in the diet and kadu, spicy diet. He used to take dadi with pickles. So dadi, rice and pickles was the predominant diet. And also there was divasapna. He was staying in a hostel, and so he used to take dadi and all these things, and he used to sleep well in the daytime. So we could assume the dusha also from the given nidana, so that we implied rasa and recta. So especially it is told dadi amla mastu suktanam, etc., etc. is told in Vidhi. So we implied that it is a recta predominant, and we formulated the treatment based on that. So kapha pitta hara measures along with the recta prasadana measures, and the patient responded. So this is how, with the help of the nidana, even we can identify the dusha that is involved in the patient, especially in hypothyroidism, etc. It is very confusing to derive the dusha available in the patient. And regarding the prognosis, I think we all know regarding the prognosis why nidana is important, because Charaka Sutra, isn't it? Charaka Sutra, it is told Hedava Pura Rubani, Rubani, Alpani, etc. etc. Naja Tulya Guno Dosha, etc. So if the Hedu is mild, then disease is also mild, so it is Sadhya, like that. So for prognosis, we need dosha. Then in the treatment approach, especially for Nidana Parivarjana, I will give you a simple example. A patient came with urticaria. It's a chronic urticaria, and we will give some medicines, and the patient will get some relief, and again the patient will come back with that. So we couldn't identify why this patient is not getting rid of that. So we did Virajana and all those stuff, but the patient is not responding to that treatments properly. Then we did an elaborate diet assessment. We made a diet chart and all, and then we started plotting in a timeline what happened. So the patient used to have this exaggerated phenomenon when the patient takes passion fruit juice. So we identified that and we mitigated that, and now the patient is totally free of the illness. So there are some scenarios where identifying the particular inciting nidana and doing the nidana parivarjana will be very effective in managing a case. So we do say that nidana parivarjana meva chikitsa, but the problem is that we don't spend enough time with the patient to identify that. We just make a modern diagnosis, urticaria is equal to Shida Pitta is equal to Manjishtadi Kashaya, and we go about that. So such an approach will not be beneficial as far as an Ayurvedic approach is concerned. Then for the treatment, again, it's explicably told in different parts of the Samhitas regarding why this Nidana assessment is important. I have quoted reference from only some selected areas that came to my mind when I was preparing this presentation. So dosha dusha nidananam viparidam hidam dhruvam. Uktan gadan sarvan. So what he says is that even though you don't name the disease, but you identify the dosha and dusha involved, you identify from which nidana, specific nidana, this dosha has been vitiated in this patient. So that is why he says, Yadyapicha yad nidana viparidam bheshajam, tad dosha viparidena grihidum paryade, yado nidanena dosha pragoba kriyade, etc. etc. He says, Tasya cha doshasya viparidam yatha, ruksha nidana vruddho vayo rukshe, yo viparida sneha, sanidane abhi viparida eva, etc. etc. He says, so that we have to identify that specific nidana. So that is why nidana assessment is important in treatment. And addressing the specific nidana, as I told, so that again there are various references, Shidena, Ushnagrida and Rogan, so that if the Vada Prakopa has happened due to Shida, then you give Ushna. If the Vada Prakopa has happened due to Ruksha, then you go for Snigdha Prayoga. So this is where we identify whether we have to go with Kaya Saga as a treatment, or we go with what you call Shashtika Pinda Seveda, Navarakiri as a treatment. So how to decide all these things in a patient with Vada Vyadhi? You can decide based on the Nidana that is available in the patient. So if the patient underwent Ruksha Pragopaga Ahara Viharas and the patient has Ruksha, Stamba, etc., then you go for Kaya Sega. But if the patient had Lagu Guna Pradana Nidana and the patient ended up in flaccidity, and then you go for Shashtika because it is Dardegara. So based on the Nidana, we can even identify specific treatment protocols for a given patient. Again, in deciding whether we have to go for a dosha pratyaniga chikitsa and vyadhi pratyaniga chikitsa, this I am going to discuss in detail in the coming slides. So I am skipping this now. So next, so this is what I have told till now. So first I went about explaining the importance of having a pure Ayurvedic approach, not in the practice what I am saying, but at least while prescribing, we should have a pure Ayurvedic approach because our medicines are formulated based on Ayurvedic principles rather than modern pharmacology or modern what you call histopathologies. So we have to equip our students to concentrate on to reinvigorate our own principles and to apply that in clinical practice. And then I went about explaining the importance of identifying the Nidana. And now I'm going about how we can interpret the different classifications of Nidanas. I have selected only some important classifications here because of the time constraints. As far as we all know, there are a lot of classifications of Nidana. I'm not going to detail about all those things. So first classification is, so I have put number like 1, 2, etc. That is different types of classifications. That doesn't indicate the number of Nidanas. So one is the Bahya and Abhyandara Nidana. So Bahya, Ahara, Ajara, Kala, Deha, Abhyandaro, Dosha, Dusha, so it is told. So where dosha itself is considered as a nidana. So here what we can do is that we can just apply the principles that we learned in Padartha Vijnana. So Samavayi Karana and Asamavayi Karana, etc. So dosha, without dosha, there is no disease. So that is why dosha is a nidana. Then there are nidanas specific for dusha and srodhas. So this we all know this loga, aharascha viharascha yasya dosha gune samaha, dadubir vigunaschavi. So a nidana can incite a dosha and this dosha can incite a dosha. There is another possibility. Simultaneously, the nidana can incite a dosha along with the dosha. So, specific nidanas. That is why all these nidanas are told in the Charaka Vimana for each srodhasas. For example, Medya Namcha Bhakshanat, Medovaha srodhas. So, apart from inciting the kapha dosha, it also affects the Medodad, obviously because of the Asraya bhava. So there is a dosha specific nidana as well. We can clarify this more when we go through this explanation from the commentary, where he says Acharyas have told nidanas for specific doshas at one instance. And coming into the Nidana Sthana and Chikitsa Sthana, he has explained nidanas for each diseases separately. So why he has to go about that? That is why he says Sarva Vyadi Vishayam, Trividam Yad Nidana Muktam, Tat Sarva Vyadi Vishayam. So that this Asatmendriyartha Samyoga, Pratnya Aparada, Parinama, etc. These are applicable, or these are generalized nidanas, which can be applicable for all diseases. Idam tu Pradiniyada Vishayam. So that Pradiniyada Vyadi Nidana. So that specific nidanas. Yado na sarve roga jayande kim tarhi kaschideva vyadi kudaschid roga, etc. He says. So that this is the importance. So that the nidanas told in the specific chapters, they imply that apart from inciting the dosha, these nidanas will also enable the samprapti to get concentrated in that specific vyadi marga through this or the given dhadus. So that is why a sarva vyadi nidana is different from a pradiniyada nidana. So this is why usually what happens. This is it's a very generic explanation. So that there is a nidana, it can incite the dosha, it can incite the dosha, or it can go through one channel as such. Nidana, dosha, in turn dosha, Gavaigunya, Sthana Samsaran Vyadi, or this can go as a simultaneous process as well. Then there is another classification, like this is something like practical that we can use, like Aharaja, Viharaja, Kala, Agandu, Kulaja. Again, in Sutra Sthana Ashtanga Doshaja Karmaja and Dosha Karmaja is told. Obviously, that is a Vyadi classification, but still we can imply that into dosha. Then again, Sahaja, Garbaja, Jadaja, Pidaja, Kalaja, Prabhavaja, Sabhavaja. So these are nosology or classification of diseases based on the etiology. So this can be considered as different etiological processes. Then there is another classification which is we usually use in practice: Sannikrishta, Viprakrishta, Vebhijari, and Pradhanika. I am not going to detail these logas, but I will just give you an example how we can illustrate that in clinical practice. For example, a person went into a hotel and he ate food that is spoiled. So there are two possibilities. One is the bacteria can form some toxin in that food, so that there is a preformed toxin because the food is already spoiled. And the patient takes that food and the patient develops the clinical manifestation within 24 to 42 hours, usually within 24 hours. Why? Because this organism doesn't need to go for a incubation period, because already that staphylococcal toxin is formed. It's a preformed toxin. That toxin induces that visujiga. Then it is a pradhaniga hedu because it is visha, pradhanigo vishadi. So there is no time interval where there is a typical samprapti like chaya, pragoba, prasara, etc. Immediately it starts the vyadi. So that is a preformed toxin. But if the preformed toxin is very feeble, so that the Agni could take care of that, so that the patient's GIT digested that toxin and the patient didn't get any disease, then it is a Vebhijari hedu, because Vebhijari yada yo durbalatva vyadikarana asamartaha. It is durbala. But when so many Vebhijari hedu come into play, then it may go into disease. That is why it is considered as a hedu. And instead of the preformed toxin, if the patient takes bacteria, then what happens? This bacteria, whatever the bacteria may be, E. coli, staphylococcal, whatever it is, it has to go through that incubation period. Then it produces a disease. But still, the patient will get the disease within a period of 48 to 72 hours. So that within 3 days. So this is a Sannikrishta Nidana, where this typical Chaya, Pragoba, etc. will not happen, but it induces Pragoba. Usually, these patients does not need any Shodhana procedures. You just give symptomatological Shamana measures and the patient will respond to the treatment. There is another scenario where for a prolonged time, the patient undergoes irregular dietary habits and the patient lands up in a Grahani dosha. This is a typical Viprakrishta hedu because it goes through the typical process of Chaya, Pragoba, etc. and establishes itself as a Vyadi. In such a scenario, only Shamana may not be beneficial, but we may have to go for a typical Agni Dipana, Shodhana, Shamana, Rasayana protocols. So this is the implication of this classification when we come to clinical practice. So see, I am not telling this from my mind, but it is told in the Samhitas. If you go through Ashtanga Hridaya, Sutra Sthana, Ridujariya chapter, there he says, again, the Charya is two, that is Shodhana and Shamani. Tatra Chaya Purvage Pragobe Shodhani, Ajaya Purvage ja Shamani ja. So in Chaya Purvaga, we may have to go for Shodhana. So most of the Viprakrishta Nidanas, they take the patient through the, so all these chronic diseases and chronic nidana exposes. That is why we find it very difficult to treat diabetes, because that is a viprakrishna hedu. The patient has been taking all these kapha medo hara viharas for a prolonged time right from the childhood. Patient lands up in diabetes, and now we cannot treat that because it has deep seated because of this long disease process. Ajaya Purvaka, usually Shamana will do, but in some cases, Shodhana may be needed. In Vebijari, you just follow the Swastha Vrita and Nidana Parivarjana. There is no need of any treatment because that is what you call Abalatvat. Nidana is Abala there. Then there is Pradhaniga Hedu, so that it's a very acute cause, just like Visha. Then there you may have to go for an Ateiga Chikilsa. Let us take an example of a lumbar IVDP, 2 cases of lumbar IVDP. So these patients, both are male age. These are assumptions because these we have seen in practice, but this is just an assumption. Suppose both are male aged 35, and in the first male, he went through healthy habits and no concurrent morbidities like Pakvashagada, etc., etc. He developed an intervertebral disc prolapse following a fall, and the presentation was Vada predominant. Then just Shamana, Vada Shamana, like Kadi, Vasti, etc., will be enough, and the rest followed by Shamana and Balya medicines will be enough for him. But look at the second case, the same 35-year-old male, but the patient is constipated for the last prolonged periods. Pakvashagada Vada and Udavarta has developed in the patient, and the patient developed a spontaneous IVDP due to that with a gradual progression. The presentation is Vada predominant, but Shamana will not work here. You may have to go for a Shodhana, especially the Vasti protocol, then go for Shamana and Balya and Rasayana protocols. So based on the difference in the Nidana, the therapy also has differed. Let us see another case. This is a very interesting case. It's a case of dermatomyositis. This is a 32-year-old female. So she came with a diagnosed dermatomyositis. And typically, the patient, when we analyzed, the patient had a Rektagada Vada Lakshanas. So rather than Vada Rekta, the patient had Rektagada Vada Lakshanas. Then we took an elaborate history. Then that the patient at the age of 21, and her husband is sexually very active, and he is reluctant to use all these what you call contraceptive measures. So this patient underwent repeated induced abortions in the first month, repeated 6 or 7. So we implied that Rekta Sruti might have caused Vada Pragopa, leading to Rekta Gada Vada Lakshanas, and we incorporated Rekta Rekta Pradhara Chikilsa also, and the patient responded very nicely to the treatment. So, but I am not saying that in every case of dermatomyositis you go and do Rekta Pradhara. That is not possible. You have to identify this thing in the given patient. So in this case, this Rekta Srava was a Viprakrishna Nidana, which when was prolonged for a period, the patient ended up in a very serious disease. So in Nidana, again in Vadavyadi, he says, Vishamad Ubajaraja, Doshasrik Sravanadadi. So whenever we go, it's always we need to carry our samhidas to the bedside and read between the lines and try to identify that particular factor in the given patient to draft the treatment protocol. So as Nidana teachers, are concerned, rather than going and teaching them a one-to-one modern correlation, my opinion is that we always have to go and enable them to identify such subtle indicators in the patient, especially Ayurvedic indicators. Since I spoke about the Pradhaniga Hedu here, just a small note on the concept of Visha. This concept of Visha is not only important as far as the snake bite or other Vishas are concerned. There is another concept of Dushi Visha, which is very important in our current Ayurvedic practice. Most of the modern drugs, when used continuously, they act as Dushi Visha. Food adulterants, preservatives, because there are so many conditions where we may not be able to identify what is going on in this patient. Suppose I'll give an example. A patient came with a chronic diabetes and the patient had a diarrhea. The diarrhea is not stopping. Whatever medicines we give, the diarrhea is not stopping. And finally, after some 6 to 7 visits, we identified that the patient's anti-diabetic medicines were causing this diarrhea. When we stopped that, the diarrhea also got stopped. So sometimes these things can start acting as Visha in the patient. So we have to try and identify that in the given patient. Food adulterants, Viruddha environmental toxins, isn't it? So the typical definition of this Doshi Visha in Susruta, Jirnam, Vishagna, Ushadibirhadam, Davag, etc., etc. We know, I am not going to detail about that. So that is one type of classification, Sannigrishta, Viprakrishta, Vebijari, and Pradhaniga. And we discussed why clinically this is important. And next is regarding the other classification, that is Asatmendriyartha Samyoga Prajnavarada and Parinama. So this is a Sarva Vyadhi Nidana rather than a specific Vyadhi Nidana. The utility is understanding this is primary prevention and management. For example, there was a male patient aged 37 and who presented with primary infertility. The patient was working abroad since last 24 years of age, and he had very irregular food habits and lot of junk foods because he used to take food outside. So we considered the Viruddha concept there. And if you go through the reference of Viruddha, he says Shandya, Andya, Visarpa, etc., pathologies that is happening. So this Viruddha and the Vishahara Chikitsa was followed in this patient, and the patient conceived as well. Next is another patient. So this patient came with urticaria. Again, this is another case, interesting case of urticaria. So this is a female with chronic urticaria for 3 years. And we did all the routine treatments, Guluchadi Kashaya, Manjishtadi Kashaya, etc., and Virajana and all. But the patient was not responding. Then what we did is we went for another elaborate history taking. Then the patient told an interesting factor that the patient uses that tongue cleaner every day morning. And whenever she uses that, she gets that vomiting urge, usually on a daily basis. And she used to suppress that. And interestingly, what we did is we tried Vamana and then we tried Siraveda. Then the patient's urticaria went off. So the reference comes from Charaka Sutrasthana, where Charde Vega Pradigadat, Kale Chanavasejanat. So Shonita Dushti, the patient's Shonita Dushti was due to that Nidana, and the Vamana rectified that problem, and the patient became free of the illness. So again, the importance of identifying the patient-specific Nidana. This is another patient, a male aged 39, and he is a civil engineer in Gulf. And in being in Kottakkal and Malappuram district, we get a lot of patients who are working abroad because most of the population here, they are in Gulf countries. So it's a male aged 39. He's a civil engineer in Gulf and usually works in ship and other areas in marine field. So he don't get to pass urine quite frequently. So morning he enters into the duty, he can pass urine only around 3 o'clock. So morning 9 o'clock he goes into the duty and 9 o'clock he comes out. Sorry, 3 o'clock he comes out. And he developed prostatitis. So the Mutra Vega Dharana was the Nidana here. So these are some examples of Prajnavarada that we can highlight, especially when we teach such Nidanas to the students. This is another interesting case of a gastric ulcer. Again, the patient had a gastric ulcer since 3 years. The patient is working in Finland, and when he was on a visit to Kerala, he came to me. The patient's dietary habits was very, horrible. It's a horror because the patient sleeps at 9 o'clock in the morning and wakes up at 3 o'clock, does some work and goes out, and he starts attending his work at 9 o'clock in the night, and he used to eat junk food in the night, and there is loss of sleep, etc., etc. And the patient's gastric ulcer is not healing. He's complaining that my gastric ulcer is not healing. Again, we know all these lines from the Chula Nidana, Vyayamayana Dadimayudunacha, Prajagarat, Adyashanat, Upavasat, etc., things. So we could identify 3 or 4 factors that is told in the Samhita in the given patient. And unless you go and do this Nidana Parivarjana, we cannot treat the patient. Again, one of the another important Samprapti and Nidana that is important in the current era is the Agni or the Grahani dosha. Again, Abhojanada, Ajirnada, etc. We know the sloga. If you go through and you analyze dietary habits of most of the patient that comes to you, then you can see that you can identify at least 3 or 4 factors present in this. Most of the chronic back pain, neck pain, etc. that comes to you, you just assess Grahani dosha lakshanas. You will find that in at least 80% of the patients. And you, without treating back pain like applying Narayana Taila, etc., you please start treating Grahani dosha and the patient will start getting relief. I'm not saying that in every case it is like that, but at least in patients who are not responding properly to your treatment, you try Grahani Chikitsa, the patient will start responding. And in that, he says that the whatever Nidanas that the patient underwent for Agni Dushti, the patient can end up in Annavisha and Samsrajyamanam Pittena Daham Trishnam Jaramaya. And like that, it can cause a lot of disorders that is especially evident in the current era. Then there is also an implication on the mind if you see. So this was a patient, he's a teacher in an engineering college. So he came with the depressive episodes, depressive moods. And we couldn't find out any specific Nidanas. But when we elaborated the bowel habits, then the patient had Muhurbadda Muhurdrava Purisha since childhood. So here the Grahani ended up in Manas Sadhana. If you go through Vadaja Grahani reference, Manasaha Sadhanam Tada is a Lakshana told. So the patient was managed based on the Grahani, Nidana and Chikitsa, and the patient responded to the treatment. This is another interesting case who presented with the bilateral ptosis, and the patient was evaluated at different neurological centers, and the patient was diagnosed as having myasthenia, etc., etc. But when she came to us, we did an elaborate history. The patient was not revealing it properly. Then we have a Smriti meditation technique that is practiced in Kottakkal, and we employed that technique, and the patient really revealed so many psychological abnormalities. And when we addressed that, you can see the picture after the treatment. The patient is totally free of that illness. So we also have to consider the role of Manasiga Nidana, isn't it? This line is very important. Dadunam samshayat, Chinda, Shoga, etc. is told in the Vada Vyadhi Nidana. But when we teach the students, we don't teach it with examples. If we start teaching them with clinical examples, then they will never forget that to elicit in the given patients. So this is another example of a manodosha. This female, around a 24-year-old, she used to visit my clinic with a typical, what you call dystonia. We can say dystonia. So the spasmodic episodes in the lower limb. This is typically the image that the patient presents. So the patient once came to me, then I gave some medicines, Thailam, Sangujide, Abhengo, Masha Saindava Sadhinam, etc. We gave. And the patient responded. After some 3 to 4 months, again the patient came with the same complaint. Again, we did the same treatment, but at that time we went for other evaluations like serum, calcium, etc., etc. Because we don't know why these cramps are happening. But again, after some 3 months, again the patient came. So then we asked her husband to come, and when we assessed the nidana, then the husband told that whenever she has a fight with her mother-in-law, she will develop some psychological abnormalities, and she goes into this episode. So here, Manas was the culprit, and you might be getting a lot of this. Previously, it is used to be called as hysteria, and now the new terminology in the latest what you call DSM criteria, it is dissociative disorders. So we get a lot of these things, but unless we identify that, we cannot address that in the treatment. Next is the parinama. So in parinama, usually we just superficially go through that, but we can see that there are a lot of diseases that have a seasonal pattern. For example, in Kerala, we get a lot of plantar fasciitis in the November, December, especially in females. We know the seasonal pattern of Tamaka Shwasa. Again, there are predispositions, age predispositions. So like that, parinama is also very important. There is another classification, dosha hedu, vyadhi hedu, and ubaya hedu. So dosha hedu is something that initiates the doshas, but may not go into a vyadhi. But a vyadhi hedu is something that causes the khavai gunya there and progresses the samprapti to end up in a vyadhi. And there are some other nidanas which can do the two things. And Gayadasa says, Thana samsrayanam hedo vyadhi hedavaha. So that particular nidana that causes the sthana samsraya can be considered as a vyadhi hedu. So let us see what are the clinical examples. So that, for example, a change in the diet or kala can cause dosha visheshan. But there is no rule that it has to lead into a vyadhi. But there is another example. I had a patient from Gulf. So he developed psoriasis. The typical history is that he is working in a very hot area. So he goes into the AC and without subjecting himself to the transition zone, he directly exposes himself to the hot climate outside. So he comes into the AC and goes outside. Like this, 3 to 4 years, he developed psoriasis. So there are some typical nidanas that will directly take you to skin diseases, kushta. So here, that is a specific vyadhi hedu. We get a lot of patients like that. Then there are other nidanas like irregular food habits with irregular timings. This can cause dosha dushti as well as the khavai gunya in the navahasrodas. So this act as a both vyadhi hedu and ubaya hedu. Sorry, dosha hedu and vyadhi hedu. So that is why they can be considered as a ubaya hedu. So like that, lot of examples we can draw from the current practice, and we will be able to identify that in the patients. Why this is important? To choose the therapy and the selection of the medicines as well. So that is one classification, dosha hedu, vyadhi hedu, and ubaya hedu. Next is the utpadaka and vyanjaga hedu. Utpadaka again is nothing but the instigating nidana, and vyanjaga hedu is nothing but the precipitating cause. So something initiates the process, and the other one will help that to into the vyadhi. For example, in bronchial asthma, the patient undergoes Kaphavada Pragobaga Ahara Vihara, and the Kaphavada Pragoba happens. And the taking the patient into Tamakashwasa. Then there are seasonal variations which precipitates this. So the patient gets the aggravation of that symptom in particular seasons. So that is a Utpadaka Hedu and a Vyanjaga Hedu. Why it is important? Always this Vyanjaga Hedu, if we can identify that, then we can address that in the treatment protocol. So there are a lot of examples for the precipitating cause. For example, Prakriti, as I told, different chikungunya patients presented with different presentations and severity. Even the present COVID-19, there is a varied degree of manifestation. Disease phenotypes varies. Why? Because of this precipitating causes like Prakriti, Kala, Desha, Ahara Viharas, medicines, etc. So this is a female patient. She is an MBBS doctor, actually, 32-year-old female. So she actually came with rheumatoid arthritis. She had a history of rheumatoid arthritis, family history, but she didn't have any rheumatoid arthritis. But once her husband got an MD seat in Shimla and she shifted her family to Shimla. So now she has to take care of her family. The diet changed, the climate changed, and she developed rheumatoid arthritis. So here the change of residence and food habits acted as the Vyanjaga Hedu. Maybe the instigating cause was something different, but once she shifted there, she developed this rheumatoid arthritis. So such things we can identify in patients. Again, this can be substantiated with all the modern studies. For example, there are various concepts of autoimmunity with reference to geoepidemiology, environmental factors and geoepidemiology in autoimmune diseases, etc., etc. Again, even in infective disorders now, they are saying that there are drivers or indicators that can cause variations in the presentation. So these can be considered as Vyanjaga Hedu. Next Nidana that is not present as such as a classification is Ashuddha Chikilsa. This we get lot in our practice now. Ashuddha Chikilsa on the part of modern practitioners, Ashuddha Chikilsa on the part of Ayurvedic practitioners. So we will be astonished to know that how many of our Ayurvedic practitioners are causing or doing Ashuddha Chikilsa. So Charaka says, Evam Krichatamam Nradam Drishyande Vyadi Sangraha Prayoga Aparishuddhatvat. And if we go through various disease nidanas, this Prayoga Aparishuddhatva is explained. For example, Mithya Pradikarmanava in Gulma, then Virega Vamana Sneha Vibramat in Grahani, then Mithyopajara in Shofa. Like that, these are only some examples that I got. So this we get lot in practice. So Prayoga Shamayed Vyadi, Yo Anyamanya Mudiret, na asau Vishuddha, Shuddhastu Shamayedo na Kobayet, he says. So this is a patient with a Grahani. Actually, this patient didn't have Grahani initially. The patient only had back pain. And the patient underwent Ayurvedic treatment for 10 years for back pain. And different medicines were given at different intervals, different Shodhana procedures. And finally, the patient ended up in such a state that the patient was not at all able to tolerate any of the medications, especially the Ushna medicines. The patient was not at all able to tolerate. Even a small medicine like Rasna Saptaha Kashaya, the patient was not able to tolerate because the Grahani as an aveva is damaged because of all these previous medications. So such things are also available in the patients. Only thing is that we fail to identify and then we fail to treat such patients. And next concept is after the Nidana, sir, Nidanarthakara Rogas. So this we know, Nidanarthakara Roga, Rogasya Pibajayade. And there are a lot of debates going on between the difference between Nidanarthakara Roga and Upadrava, etc., etc. I am not going into detail about that. Just to give you some clinical examples of how Nidanarthaka Roga should be considered and the treatment of that main Vyadi should be considered in the management. Kasidi Rogo Rogasya Hetur Budva Prashamedi, Na Prashamedi Chapinyo Hetutvam Gurdeya Bicha, etc. is told. So this is a patient with Henoch Schonlein purpura, HSP. I told it in a short form. I'm sorry for that. It's a patient with Henoch Schonlein purpura. It's a 23-year-old male presented with purpuric rashes, especially in the lower limbs. And when we took the history, the patient had a fever and diarrhea 3 weeks back. So we considered that this is a Rakta-Pitta and Jwara was the cause. And usually when we teach Rakta-Pitta, Jwara Sandhabad Rakta-Pitta, we teach them dengue hemorrhagic fever. But we can consider that. But Jwara Sandhabad Rakta-Pitta is not only dengue hemorrhagic fever. There are a lot of ways in which Jora patient can develop bleeding manifestations. For example, severe viral infections can cause platelet suppression, marrow suppression, leading to thrombocytopenia. Some of the viral illnesses can cause thrombocytopenia, as I am going to give you an example, another case in the next slide. Like that, there are various ways in which a patient, a post-febrile patient, can develop hemorrhagic manifestations. So we just need to teach the students that concept. You see, you be wary for that in the patients. So here we incorporated the Jora chikitsa along with Raktapitta chikitsa, and the patient became free of the disease. This is another patient who is still under my treatment. This is a very chronic case of idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura. Her platelet levels usually fluctuate between 15,000 and 40,000. If we give some medicines, her platelet count will come to 40,000. Without medicines, she goes into 15,000, like that. But she had a history of viral fever, following which she developed ITP. So this is a typical example of a Nidana Arthaka Roga. And whenever we treat that, we have to incorporate that main Vyadhi Chikitsa into the treatment. There is another concept of Nidana Arthaka Roga, especially Udavarta. I think this is another important area that we fail to recognize in the clinical practice. We get a lot of patients with Pakshagada, a lot of patients with hypertension, a lot of patients, but we fail to identify Udavarta. Why? Because we tend to ignore the current diet and lifestyle of the individuals. Usually the people, they sit continuously for prolonged hours. Sitting for prolonged hours itself will obstruct the Apana Vayu, and it itself is enough to initiate the Udavarta pathology. And there are improper postures, etc. Then there is Vega Dharana as well. So recently there was a study regarding Mutra Vega Dharana and ischemic heart disease that was conducted in Kottakkal Ayurveda College. Actually, they are going to get published in Journal of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine soon, very soon. So they have submitted for that. I think peer review is going on. So they found an interesting pattern that some of the patients who developed ischemic heart disease, they had this Vega Dharana. So like that, our principles are there. Only thing is that we need them to be noticing them and validating them in our practice. So if you take Arshas Nidana, there he says, Tada Utkatuga Vishama Kadhinasana Sevanat, etc. etc. Then he says, Pragubido Vayurapanaha. So it is told in Samhitas, but we fail to interpret that. Again, if you go through Panchakarma, he says Ashta Mahadosha Varjigara Bhavas, Uchcher Bhashyam, Radakshobham, Adi Chankramanam. So this Radakshobha, bike journey, bus journey, etc. etc. Then Adi Asanam, these are not good for our health. And people end up in Udavarta. And they come with manifestations. You see this case of blepharospasm. This patient came with a blepharospasm. And the patient also had coronary artery disease. The question is that the patient was managed in the Shalakya department for several months, and the blepharospasm was not relieving. And they did all those tarpana and all those things they did, but the patient was not responding, and ultimately they referred the patient to us. When we did an elaborate history, the patient told that the patient has arshas, the patient has vibandha, the patient has recta arshas, and also the patient has speeches pertaining to Udavarta. Then just go through the diseases that can be caused by the concept of Udavarta. Hridgraha, then Ardhida, Bahavo Anilotaha. So the patient developed a coronary artery disease, the patient developed a blepharospasm, a lot of things. If you go and say this to a person who is well versed in modern pathology, they will mock at you. They will, even some of us may be finding it very difficult to digest this concept. But what I'm saying is that this is evident in our practice. When we give medicine, so we gave Udavarta Haravasti in this patient, we gave Udavarta treatment, and the patient got rid of this blepharospasm. So there are some of the things that are going on in our body that cannot be elaborated based on the modern understanding of anatomy and physiology. So sticking on to only to the modern understanding and saying that that is final, and saying that we always have to go and correlate all our things into the modern, that is not beneficial in our practice. We have to consider all these things in our practice. Next is Avarana as a Nidana. So Avarana can happen as a manifestation. You take Anyonya Avarana, their Avarana is a manifestation. And you take Medasavrada Vayu, where that Medasavrada Vayu is a Nidana for Vada Prakopa. So in that patient, there will be a Nidana for Medas, and that Medas led to Avarana of Vada. So this here, their Avarana is as a Nidana. So the evidence of this avarana can be extracted from the presentation in the patient, from the nidana that is available, and the response to the treatment. I am not a person who directly correlates typical modern conditions with that of typical avaranas. For example, Parkinson's is equal to Kaphavrata Vyana. This may be very good theoretically, but in practice, that may not be the case. I have a lot of Parkinson's patient where Pippelyadi Mamsarasa and Dhadu Poshaka treatment have given very good result. So this, we have to identify that in the given patient. So whenever we imply avarana, we have to imply that based on three important things. One is the clinical manifestation in the patient. The second one is the available nidana in the patient, not in the textbook, and the upasya and upasya of the patient. So here there is an example. This is a patient with cervical myelopathy. The patient was quadriplegic and the patient was managed in a modern medical facility, and the patient came with a quadriplegia. So when we took the history, the patient had madhumeha, all the sandarpana janya nidanas. So we implied mehada kapha avarana, sarvangavada, and we went with the avarana chikilsa. We went for Rajayavana Vasti, etc. And especially we went for Leshuna Rasayana. And after 3 months of the treatment, the patient got discharged still on the stretcher. But after 1 month, the patient came walking with a walking support. And now the patient can walk without any support. So this is how you identify avarana as a nidana and you treat that. So just to highlight, we usually say Dhaduksha and avarana simultaneously. That is why actually contextually the Dhaduksha should not be told here. It has to be a separate nidana. But just to tell a case. So it was a male with a facial palsy, 46 years. And he was a bank watchman, a very poor socio-economic status. So undernourished, etc., etc. And the patient had sleep deprivation. So here the implied nidana was Dhaduksha, and all the Brahmana measures, including Sirovasti, etc., was done, and the patient became normal. So that is not the case in every facial palsy. In some of the facial palsy, you may identify avarana and kapha, and you may go for vamana. So we cannot say that every facial palsy is equal to, or every Bell's palsy is equal to vamana and chitraga rasayana. We cannot say like that. You have to identify the nidana in the patient and you have to treat that. Okay, coming to the conclusion of different types of nidanas, one sloga is very important. Ego hedur anegasya, tada egasya ega evahi, vyadir egasya baho bahunam bahavastada. So one etiology can cause several diseases, and one disease can be caused by several etiologies. I will give you an example. So he, again in Ashtanga Hridaya Sutra, he says, Nidana meda doshanam, kubidas tena neigata. That neigata is very important. The doshas can get initiated by varied etiology, diverse etiologies. So that is why a varied etiology is very important. Let us see 3 cases of psoriasis. So this is an example of a similar modern disease, but initiated by 3 different nidanas. So this is a male aged 44 presented with psoriasis. And again, we have a habit of taking an elaborate history, especially in the IP. In the OPD facility, it may not be feasible always. But in IP, we do that regularly, and we even teach our students to do like that. So an elaborate history revealed the use of various toxic substances because he was a goldsmith. He used to use even cyanide. So we implied a concept of Gara and Doshi Visha there, and we incorporated Visha Chikilsa, and the patient got relief. So Doshi Vishamdu, Shonida Dushtyaru, Kidiba, etc. is told. So Doshi Visha can lead to Shonida Dushti and all these Kushta manifestations. So that is why in this patient we considered Visha as a Nidana. Let us take another psoriasis case. So this patient came with the Pitta Kapha Pradhana presentation. We usually imply that every psoriasis is Vata Kapha. That is not the case. Depending upon the stage or the avastha, the patient can present with a different dosha manifestations. So this typically the patient came with a Pitta Kapha. And on history, he told that he migrated to the Gulf country 2 years back, and he gets relief from the symptom when he comes to Kerala. So here there is an importance of Desha there. So usually Desha here is working as a Venjaga Hedu and advising the patient to what you call avoid that, and also incorporating that Pitta Hara Chikilsa, because that Desha is a Vada Pitta predominant Desha. We incorporated some Pitta Hara treatment as well. So the patient responded. This is another case. So here this happened as a Nidanarthagar Roga. The patient had an episode of chikungunya, following 2 weeks the patient had as the psoriatic eruptions. So here the Jwara has triggered this autoimmune process. So there the psoriasis nidana was different. So here we can see that same disease the same modern diagnosis, but different nidanas. So how can we go about say that psoriasis is sigma and you do Vata Kapha treatment, Manjishtadi Kashaya or Mahamanjishtadi in every patient? I request that this is not the Ayurvedic approach that is envisaged by our Acharyas. Acharyas have envisaged our science to be interpreted based on the Lakshanas and Nidanas. So why different Vyadis when doshas are only 3? Again, there are explanations. Hedu Vishesha Dushtohi, Saeva Dosho. This is very important. Hedu Vishesha Dushto. So depending upon the specificity in the Hedu or the Hedu Vishesha, the manifestation can vary and the treatment and selection of medicine also will vary. And again, Aparisangeya, Prakriti Adhisthana, etc. We know that. And the probabilities of manifestation, we all know this loga from Charaga Nidana Sthana Prameha, where Nidana Dosha Visheshebhyo Bhava Bhava, etc. We know that. So finally, to the final part of my presentation. So I told the importance. Now the question will be how to assess or how we teach our students to assess this. This is a very big question where I need your help as well, because I am not a master in assessing Nidana. I explained what all things I have been doing in my practice. But I think the Nidana family has to develop some elaborate techniques to enable our students to assess this in the patients. So one thing that we can do is we teach the students, apart from what you call eliciting the modern history, we have to teach them the way of an Ayurvedic history taking. For example, diet, we write mixed. So we write mixed. What is mixed? What are you mixing? Just we write in the diet mixed. That is not the case. In the diet, we have to ask them to identify and write elaborately the patient's long-term dietary habits. Otherwise, how are we going to identify what happened in this patient? Why this patient developed a Grahani? Why this patient developed a psoriasis? Why not the other patient? So we have to teach them to identify the long-term dietary preferences, their long-term work and other habits, the environmental factors which they have been exposed to, the family details, the other illnesses that the patient went through, the medications and the therapies that the patient has been subjected to. And there is another timeline method that we can do that I'm going to explain later on. And then there is a concept of herd nidana, again that I will explain, and the method of inference. For example, in some of the cases, we may not at all able to identify what the nidana is, where we only have to do the anumana pramana. So here, this is just an example. We ask the students to identify the nidanas. So we ask them to prepare an elaborate diet chart, and you classify the diet timings like breakfast, lunch, evening, and we ask them to literally write what are they using, what are the diet items that they use on a regular basis, idli, dosha, chapati, whatever it is, for lunch, for evening snacks, for dinner, like that. And also we have to specifically ask whether they used to skip the meals, whether they have irregular timings, night food, overeating, etc., etc. We have to ask. So an elaborate diet history is very important. Then there is a daily routine chart. This also we have to ask them, not only the immediate period of the disease, but we have to ask them to write it in an elaborate basis, a long-term basis. So how do they wake up? How is their sleep? How sound is that? How is their bowel and micturition? Do they do any exercise or yoga? Like that, lot of things. These are only indicators. Then there is a timeline approach where what we can do is, this is just an example. So here a patient, a 34-year-old female patient presented with quadriparesis. So we don't know why this patient developed a quadriparesis. The patient's typical pattern is that of myopathy, so that muscle involvement is indicated by all these lab parameters like a creatine kinase, etc. So now we need to identify what is going on in this patient. So we took an elaborate history and plotted that on a timeline. So at the age of 32, the patient developed myopathy. At the age of 28, the patient had obesity, and it is continuing. And at the age of 23, the patient had dyslipidemia. At the age of 14, the patient had thyroid enlargement. Now we can see a pattern in this. So most of these things are kapha and medo predominant pathologies. So now we can imply that this myopathy is an avarana pathology in this patient. Why? Because the patient's all nidanas and the previous presentation was coming to the nidana. I will tell you that there is an interesting factor. So all these sampraptis that were going on in this timeline is kapha medo predominant. Now, when we probed further, then the patient said that the patient right from the childhood and even after the marriage, the patient is living beside a lake where it is a stagnant water. There is no flow. I am not claiming that that is a nidana, But that is a clue that gives, in our Samhitas, it says that stagnant water is always Guru. And this Guru can always initiate Kapha and Vada pathologies. So maybe that has initiated this patient. That doesn't mean that every patient with a myopathy is residing near a lake. And this theory, I know it sounds absurd because I didn't prove that based on the modern what you call trial parameters. So I may be wrong. But what I'm saying is that such a timeline method sometimes will help us to identify what is going on in the given patient, especially in the chronic diseases. Then there is a concept of herd nidana. We see now that, suppose let us take Gujarat or Kerala as an example. The people of Gujarat, they have a common pattern of diet and lifestyle. The people of Kerala, they have a common pattern of diet and lifestyle. So just like the concept of herd immunity that we have in COVID-19, the same way we have a herd nidana. That means a group of people, they are following a typical diet pattern and lifestyle. So the diseases that are presenting in them will be same. For example, you take South India, we have a lot of rice eating population. So you take a myocardial infarction and diabetes, we have a lot of patients. Why? Because they follow this white rice, they follow this Navanapana. So that is a herd nidana. So the students will sometimes come and tell, sir, I was not able to identify why this patient got Pakshagada and dyslipidemia. Then I will ask the students, where are they residing? What are their predominant dietary habits of Kerala? Okay, then that is the nidana. The patient is undergoing that right from the childhood. So that is their nidana. So the herd nidana can be geographic, environmental, dietary, etc., etc. Basically, these can be considered too Sandarpana and Avadarpana. And this has to be read along with the concept of Gramyahara that is told in Charaka and Ashtanga Sangraha. See, even modern, they are thinking in the same line. Non-communicable diseases, risk factors, and their determinants. This was a cross-sectional study in Haryana, North India. So like that, they are also trying to think about a common pattern or a common etiology that is evolving, at least in some selected disorders. So why we don't identify that? Why are we not equipping our students to identify that? So let us take an example. I'm going to the last slide. So this is an example of hypertension. So there are two cases. One is a male aged 52, type 2 diabetes, hypertension on ACE inhibitors. So the indicators were Stula, Mandagni, Vibandha, and Udavarta. The patient had all the what you call irregular dietary habits and also Sandarpana. So we did Avadarpana pathologies, Udavarta Haravasti, and other what you call anti-Sandarpana measures. So that Lankana treatments. Then the patient's hypertension came under control without any modern medicine. So this is another misconception that we can treat hypertension with a single drug in Ayurveda. Actually, that is a separate topic. We can have a different seminar on that. Hypertension is not a one pill therapy in Ayurveda. We have to identify a lot of indicators and we have to treat the patient. This is another case, a male aged 36 diagnosed as hypertension, but there is no comorbidities like diabetes, etc. But the patient had a lot of anxiety and stress, typically Rasadushti Lakshanas or Rasadushti Nidanas, Karshya and Vada Pradhana Koshta. So the Sneha Prayoga with the Kalyana Grada settled the issue in the patient. So identifying that Nidana, especially in the given patient, helped us in managing the case. And at last, how to identify Nidana is from Anumana itself. So history, the therapeutic response, or the common patterns in the current era. These are the ways in which we can identify the Nidana. So that is what I have to say. The take-home message is Tasmat Vigara Prakriti Adhishtanandaranicha Samuthana Visheshamcha. That term is very, very important in clinical practice. Not only we have to go around with one-to-one modern correlations, we also have to equip our students to identify all these therapeutic indicators, especially in the Nidana. That is why Acharya says, identify the Vigara Prakriti, identify the Adhisthana of the Vigara, and above all, identify the Samuthana, why this thing has happened in this given patient. Then we can treat the patient in a better way. I thank all the listeners, all the participants, all the teachers, all of you for your patient listening. And I also beg your pardon if at all some mistakes have creeped on into my presentation. And I also invite suggestions so that how we can develop what you call unified assessment, what you call methodologies or techniques, so that we can equip our students to go for an Ayurvedic approach in clinical practice. I thank one and all again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. This is very vast knowledge of bunch of knowledge we got फ्रॉम अ सिंगल टॉपिक, जो हम बहुत सालों से पढ़ाते आ रहे हैं, पढ़ते आ रहे हैं। निदान के भेद हम बच्चों को हमेशा पूछते रहते हैं और हम उनको पढ़ाते भी है। एंड दिस ऑल इज इन वन लेक्चर। और जहाँ पे हमने सब कुछ देखा कि हर एक निदान को किस तरह से क्लिनिकली देखा जाए, हर एक निदान को किस तरह से डिफरेंशियल डायग्नोसिस करके हमने इसको देखा, ये इतना क्लिनिकली आपने समझाया हमें। इट शोज दैट यू हैव अ वेरी गुड clinical knowledge as well as theoretical knowledge and as well as teaching expertise. मैं सभी चेयरपर्सन की परमिशन से अगर किसी को कोई भी सवाल पूछना है या फिर कोई इनपुट्स देने हैं तो सबको आमंत्रित करता हूँ।
हाँ ठीक है। If anyone wants to ask any questions, and you can ask.
अगर कोई क्वेश्चंस नहीं है तो फिर मैं चेयरपर्सन सर, रिस्पेक्टेड अनूप वैश्य सर से मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि वो अपना कंक्लूजिव करें।
Thank you, Dr. Prasad ji. First of all, I'm very much thankful to Mukesh, Dr. Mukesh. It was a very nice and elaborative your lecture, you can say. It was almost an 1.5 hour lecture, and I think that everyone is listening very silently. Why? Because it is not a theoretical lecture. It is a both theoretical and practical lectures. Lots of things you have elaborated here, and you have given more importance on Nidan part. How the Nidan and for the every diseases, how the Nidan assessment is very much important, and how it is essential to identify the Nidan to identify the pathogenesis of the disease and in a clinical aspect, and how can we choose the different treatment also. So Nidan part, you have given lots of examples. I think that each and every example is very much your scientific based and logical based, and here Ayurvedic point of view, we can treat a different patients. So diagnosis for the diagnosis of patient for treatment purpose, and Nidan part is very much important. And you have presented about how to treat the Pakshaghat patient in different scenario. Then you have mentioned about the hypertensive patient also in different scenario. Then you have mentioned so many other patients that how the Nidan plays an important role. And being a Nidan person, I think this lecture is very much suitable for all the teachers actually, and not only all the teachers, along with the PG scholar, PhD scholar, everyone will get an nourishment to study about the Nidan in detail. So with this view, I conclude my lecture, and I congratulate all of you, and each and everyone to think about that, how Dr. Mukesh is presenting here, and each and every one of Nidan person should think about that. And on that basis, if you diagnose the patient and if we treat the patient also, then definitely Ayurveda plays an important part in everywhere. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, sir. With your permission, we can conclude, sir. Conclude it.
Definitely. If there is no any remarks from the other participants, then you can conclude the session.
Respected अतुल sir.
हाँ प्रशांत जी,
हाँ जी सर।
ठीक है, यादगी सर को या किसी को और को तो कुछ नहीं कहना।
लेक्चर है, बहुत समय हो चुका है तो उसने सभी तरह के पॉइंट्स को रखे हैं, तो मैं समझता हूं कि आज हम लोग और किसी को बोलने की जरूरत नहीं है। इट वाज इंफॉर्मेटिव क्लिनिकल लेक्चर, really appreciated by all, because he explained his clinical experience with the concepts of Ayurveda with his clinical experience. तो अच्छा रहा कुल मिला के। So it was a wonderful lecture.
Very good.
Okay, thank you sir. सभी का बहुत बहुत आभार। और जो हम शुरू से एक इस एकेडमी की स्थापना के समय से ही एक चीज लेके चले थे कि हमें पूरे भारत का रिप्रेजेंटेशन करना है, और ये बहुत खुशी की बात मेरे लिए ये है कि पूर्वोत्तर से प्रोफेसर अनूप वैसे सर हैं और दक्षिण से हमारे मुकेश सर ने आज प्रेजेंट किया था, और एक सही मायनों में पूरे भारत का रिप्रेजेंटेशन हो रहा है। और मुझे वास्तव में एक जैसे पौधा लगाए तो उसकी वृद्धि से खुशी होती है मुझे हर पल। इसीलिए इसी चीज की खुशी होती है कि 5 साल पहले हम जिस सोच को लेके चले थे कि पूरे भारत का रिप्रेजेंटेशन हो, वो सोच हमारी अब साकार हो रही है, दिन पे दिन बढ़ रही है। और आज सबने देखा कि कितने अच्छे तरीके से सर ने उस सेशन को चलाया है। और मैं एकेडमी ऑफ रोग निदान के महासचिव होने के नाते सभी का पुनः आभार प्रकट करता हूं। और प्रशांत जी, आप इस लेक्चर को समाप्त कर सकते हैं, सभी को धन्यवाद के साथ।
थैंक यू सर। सर मैंने यही कोशिश की, जब मैंने सभी से रिक्वेस्ट की कि जो लेक्चर होने चाहिए, तो मैंने अपने जो स्पीकर से कॉल किया। जैसे कभी कभी हमें दिक्कत आती है कि स्पीकर अवेलेबल नहीं हो पाते, मगर मेरे वक्त ऐसा नहीं हुआ फॉर्चुनेटली, कि मुझे सभी स्पीकर पहले ही अटेम्प्ट में हाँ कह दिया। और सबसे बड़ी बात कि मैंने जो अपना एम रखा था कि जामनगर यानी जो हमारा वेस्ट वाला पार्ट है, ईस्ट से भी हमारा रिप्रेजेंटेशन एक साथ रहो, साउथ भी रहे और नॉर्थ भी रहे। तो मेरे जो नेक्स्ट स्पीकर है वो सेंटर महाराष्ट्र से है, जबकि मैं उनको रिपीट स्पीकर है हमारे वो कोडवानी सर। और जो उसके बाद नेक्स्ट स्पीकर है वो नॉर्थ से है अखिलेश श्रीवास्तव सर। तो मैंने सब तरह से देखा कि पूरे भारत से उसका रिप्रेजेंटेशन स्पीकर का होना चाहिए। तो थैंक यू वेरी मच सर। थैंक यू अतुल सर, अनूप सर, बैडगी सर, कर सर, सभी जितने भी हमारे स्पीकर पुराने स्पीकर आए हैं उनको मैं थैंक्स कहना चाहता हूँ। और आज की जो स्पीकर है मुकेश सर, उनको स्पेशली थैंक्स कि उन्होंने उतना समय निकाला और बहुत अच्छा लेक्चर हमें आज सिल्वर जुबली लेक्चर सीरीज के लिए सिल्वर जुबली लेक्चर में दिया। थैंक यू वेरी मच टू ऑल ऑफ यू। गणेश सर।
ओके सर, थैंक यू
सर। हाँ।